Hello again, friends and fiends. We're back with another Netflix horror fix, and I'm Post-Punk Pixie, and today we are looking at a film called The Believers. Now, this is a film that, to talk about, involves talking about some pretty heavy issues. So, first of all, big old trigger warning for racism, xenophobia, and animal death. Lots of quite graphic results of animal death. So if dead chickens, dead cats, dead goats, if any of that bothers you, do not watch this. Also, trigger warning for arachnophobia. Big trigger warning for arachnophobia. If you don't like spiders, don't watch this, or at least watch it with somebody else who can tell you when the spider scene is over. There is a quite nasty spider scene in about 30 minutes before the end, and I'm quite fond of spiders myself. I was grossed out. I'll talk a little bit later on about exactly what happens. It's not very nice. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of heavy stuff in this. I was surprised when I looked up this film, having watched it, thinking, okay, this is a film that's fairly well made, and so looking at it, I was like, okay, maybe there's somebody fairly, whoever made this knew what they were doing. So I looked up the director. The director is a chap named Joe. Hang on, I'm bad at names. Joe Schlesinger, who is the director of films like Marathon Man, Midnight Cowboy, and Sunday Bloody Sunday. I'm really surprised, because although this film is quite well made, it's not good, and those other films that I just mentioned are very good. So yeah, I'm quite surprised. The cast is also pretty good. I mean, you've got Martin Sheen in this. This is baffling, because this is not a good film. It's not a pleasant film. It's it's visually well put together, but, well, let's talk a bit about the film itself and the plot and all of that stuff, like I normally do. This is the crux of the plot revolves around a Santeria cult. Now, if you don't want to know what Santeria is, it's a closed religion that came over to America with slaves. It's a sort of hybrid version of Caribbean and African sort of folk religion and Catholicism. I've got to be honest, I don't know a huge amount about the ins and outs of it, but I shouldn't know that, because it's a closed religion, and it's, largely practiced by people of colour, largely practiced by people who are either of, the descendants of slaves, effectively, or there are some groups of Hispanic practitioners as well, I believe. Now, Santeria has met a lot of controversy within American laws by the looks of things. There were a couple of serial killers who tried to set up had a semi-Santeria influenced cult at one point in the 80s and 90s, which obviously didn't give them much good press, and there's also been some toing and throwing about animal cruelty, because Santeria does involve some level of animal sacrifice in some circles, some groups. So there's been a lot of toing and throwing by the looks of things on whether or not calling out, calling this animal cruelty and, putting a ban on it is against the American Constitution, against human rights, is all very complicated, and as I say, I don't know as much as I would kind of like to. I mean, it sounds really interesting. I love. I'm really fascinated by sort of the way certain people's religions adapt, and I'm really interested in sort of religions that have a certain level of synchronicity, whether it's sort of evolved and adapted to influences from other religions, more popular religions in some cases, more mainstream religions. That's something I find really interesting, but I am a white Brit, and it's not really my place, to try and look up a religion that is closed, in case you don't know what I mean by a closed religion, it's initiatory. So you cannot call yourself a practitioner or a member of that religion unless you have gone through initiation rites. And so obviously a lot of stuff about the way it works is closed off until you get to a certain degree. I'm sure there's some information clocking about, but it's the level of accuracy is, it's a closed religion. This is a film where the main plot revolves around a version of the Santeria cult. Sorry. It doesn't treat it particularly well. Plot-wise, we start off with a very bland white family, bland wife, bland husband who's a bit of a dick, really, and their brat of a little son. In a series of bizarre and not particularly believable events, the wife gets electrocuted because she is standing in a puddle of spilt milk and touches a malfunctioning coffee machine. Anyway, this unfortunately, she dies. And then it cuts to a little while later where husband and son are moving into New York, and from somewhere they've acquired a housekeeper character named Carmen, who's an older lady, Spanish lady. So already we've got sort of Hispanic stereotypes. And we haven't even got to the black stereotypes yet. This is not a film that treats non-white people particularly well, unfortunately, and I honestly feel kind of uncomfortable watching this at many points. I mean, as I say, I'm British. If you haven't noticed that from the amount of times I say I'm British and the accent and everything, in Europe, there's this. Racism and xenophobia have slightly different bents. We don't really have that same sort of thing about Hispanic or Latino people. It's we don't tend to think of people from Spain, Portugal, that kind of area as a different race, but I mean it's more sort of the xenophobia thing, whereas I would personally consider most people in most of Europe as white, but there's still a lot of xenophobia in the UK towards, say, people from Poland, people from Yugoslavia, people from, we've got all these horrible stereotypes that are really, really ghastly, and, the unpleasant writers people who write letters to the Daily Mail or whatever are always going on about immigrants stealing our jobs, and none of it is true, none of it is relevant. But I'm not saying that there is no racism in the UK or Europe, because God, there is. There's a lot of racism, but there's levels of like the racism is almost secondary to xenophobia, if you see what I mean. It's more to do with the cultural differences and language differences and stuff like that, rather than purely the colour of the person's skin, which is the impression I kind of get of America. Again, I don't know, never been there. So yeah, this film, I feel kind of underqualified talking about some of this, especially, we have racism here, but we don't have the sort of the same sort of stereotypes about Hispanic people, people from Mexico, people who speak Spanish, whatever. So that this whole thing is a sort of bizarre mixture of making me feel deeply uncomfortable and sort of weird sort of social document of the late 80s. So yeah, that's my sort of caveat. If I grossly misunderstand the way things work on the other side of the pond, this is why we have a very, things are slightly different depending on where you are in the world, is what I'm trying to say. And failing, clearly. Yeah, we're introduced to this Spanish-speaking house cleaner type person, and we're also introduced to a younger lady named Jessica who lives across the road. She is white, she is blonde, she is love interest. She looks almost identical to the dead wife, to the point that I'm honestly not sure if it was the same actress. She looks exactly the same to me. Maybe I'm just like blonde blind or something, but they look exactly the same. So yeah, they're sort of the father character, whose name is Cal. What sort of a name is that? And this Jessica lady are sort of set up. Literally set up, it turns out. There may or may not be a love spell involved, because that's so weird. So yeah, we have that set up. The father character, Cal, has got a job as a sort of police psychiatrist working for the NYPD. And so we get a bit of a setup of him, doing his shrink job for a cop. And then we get a bit of a setup with I'm not sure who these people are supposed to be. I think they're just family friends. They're like an older couple who were, actually, I tell a lie, it is explained who they are. They were like university teachers of the wife, and they're anthropologists who don't seem to be particularly good at anthropology. There's a bit of them showing slides to the little lad of them visiting a Native American reservation, which is in itself kind of grim, and going on about, oh look, wasn't it lovely talking to these Indian people? I'm like, really? And the kid also has this bizarre little doll, sort of almost like puppet type thing, that has apparently been made for him, or bought at least, from one of these reservations, which he refers to as, I think, Chief Blackthorn or something. He also has like a war bonnet like propped up on the end of his bed, and I'm just sitting there like, oh boy, like, again, British person, we don't often interact with, we don't have Native Americans living in Britain as a rule, so I've never knowingly met or spoken to somebody of Native American descent. I'm fairly sure from what I know that they, one, don't like being called Indian. They're not from India, for a start. And also, my understanding is war bonnets were specific to a particular Plains tribes. I've got to stop trying. My childhood brain still keeps trying to say Indian, which I know is wrong. tribes from the plains. I don't even know where the plains are, but and war bonnets are given as, in my understanding, almost like a medal. So the fact that these anthropology professor types have given this small child a war bonnet. Kid ain't been in battle. Kid's not done anything special. He's a kid. Why does he have a war bonnet? That's not appropriate. So these are the most culturally sensitive anthropologists in the world. Not. And yeah, we haven't even got to the black characters yet. So anyway, while all of this sort of kerfuffle is going on, of them sort of settling in and arguing and, doing the boring family stuff, there's also a series of ritualistic child murders going on. The first one of which is in a movie theatre. We call them cinemas over here, but movie theatre. Where you don't really see the corpse, much of the corpse, but it's a white boy gets murdered, and sorry, excuse me, I just had a rather large meal. And the corpse is found by a rather hysterical Hispanic chap named Tom, I think. I can't remember. But yeah, he's yelling and shouting in Spanish, and the police are all standing around him looking rather perturbed, as they would do, while the pathologist is trying to look at this really quite bizarre murder with candles and a ring of ashes, and it's all very ritualistic and unpleasant. The rather upset Spanish chap, it becomes a fairly central character for about another half hour to an hour. He is so unwell he gets sent to a mental hospital, and eventually ends up killing himself because he thinks there are snakes inside him, and guess what? There turns out to be snakes inside him. He is clearly under the influence of this cult, possibly a member of it. The people who are and aren't members of the cult is kind of blurry. Like at points, it's kind of suggested that this is the cult leader, who's a very tall and dramatic looking black gentleman with very grey, blank eyes and sort of makeup to make him look kind of grey. Poor bloke. I feel kind of sorry for him, honestly. They don't treat him very well in this film. And then there's this sort of entourage of people from sort of Spanish Harlem, who seem to be linked around this rehab clinic, because we've got a couple of central Spanish characters. One is a cleaner, the other is in drug rehab. Great. Nice. But then there's also this sort of ring of very well-to-do yuppie cult members as well, which is most bizarre. Like, it's like they're trying to go for a sort of Rosemary's Baby thing, but also try to go for the sort of gritty, slightly racist angle, and it doesn't work. It's too many things going on. In fact, the whole thing esse and in terms of some of the reveals and things feels very Rosemary's Baby. Whoever's idea this was in the first place has clearly seen a lot of Polanski. What we're talking about, plot. Yeah, so the unwell Spanish chap dies a grisly death. There's another child murder which is shown in a lot more graphic detail, at least the corpse. This time it's a black child. I'm slightly perturbed by the fact that they show the black child in more detail than the white child. Like, this whole thing feels very uncomfortable, and I'm not saying that horror cannot deal with issues like racism and things like that. I mean, God, look, for a film that's 5 years later on, Candyman, that deals with, to my mind, deals with racism in a really interesting, sensitive way, because it flat out talks about it in times. You know, that there is a character in Candyman who's in the projects and flat out says to these white women, you think we're all gangbangers, you think we're all on drugs. Well, some of us are not, but you know, they talk about the issues of race. This film does not talk about the issues of race. They're just kind of there, and not dealt with. And there aren't many black characters in this film that have any like lines. I think that there's a black cop who has a few lines, and then there's this sort of creepy cult leader guy who is implied to be from somewhere outside of America. Well, he's from somewhere else. This is very much a film that doesn't like the other and sort of otherizes a lot of people. Basically anybody who's strayed outside of, you know, white middle class sort of suburbs. You know, the minor spoiler, but it turns out that these anthropologist friends are part of the cult, and you know, okay, white upper middle class people who have strayed outside of the realms of white upper middle class, and they become members of cult. You know, the Spanish characters all turn out to be even the housekeeper lady, who's actually very benevolent. She's very sweet. She's, you know, Potato's a little ignorant, but she's, you know, she's not evil, but she practices magic. She tries to perform a protection ritual for the little boy. The other Spanish characters are all either part of the cult or worshippers. Every character who is either non-white or has strayed away from white normality turns out to be evil, which is rather unpleasant. There's a cop who looks and speaks vaguely sort of New York Jewish, if you know what I mean. He goes mad and kills himself under the influence, which is odd because the director is Jewish, I believe. I'm really uncomfortable about this film. I don't think it deals with the things it touches on very well, and it just flat out comes across as racist and xenophobic, and I'm not sure if that was the intent. I'm not sure if, you know, this was just jumping on a bandwagon or trying to jump on a bandwagon. The result is really quite uncomfortable, and I pretty much sat through the whole thing going, oh, this is racist, I mean, there's a bit where, towards the beginning, where the family, father and child have just moved into New York, and they're wandering around in Central Park, and there's a group of black guys, you know, young lads, just flat out bongo drumming in the middle of Central Park, and then later on, you know, a few minutes later, the child stumbles across a animal sacrifice involving a beheaded cat and candles, and it really. And then there's a bit later on where the father sort of wanders into Harlem to try and speak to somebody and find out a bit more about the religion, and we're introduced to this area with a young black lad in a like cut off t-shirt with a stereo on his shoulder blasting hip hop, and I'm like, how many stereotypes are you to put in this movie, guys? Like, and you know, of course, the cult latches on to and attempts to sacrifice the little boy. This film is really unpleasant. I mean, it's kind of interesting in a kind of sociological way, looking at, you know, views on race. I mean, I always find I have this theory that horror really and specifically like trends in horror really link into sort of subconscious fears of the time, and this sort of has this sort of definite fear of the multiculturalism of New York, you know, fear of crossing boundaries, fear of cultural sort of combinations and interacting between different cultures, and it's kind of worrying, honestly. I mean, yeah, this is late 80s, but that's not that long ago, man. This is the sort of film that, you know, if it had come out in the early 70s or the late 60s, I might look at it slightly differently, because, but, you know, race relations have come a long way, and you know, especially in America, where, you know, segregation and whatever, you know, that didn't really kind of kick the bucket until the 60s, which is terrifying. And I mean, yeah, this is a country pretty much built around slavery, and yeah, I mean, God, you look at America now, and it's terrifying. Honestly, I'm genuinely kind of concerned for you guys right now, because the amount of things that are going on right now are kind of terrifying. You know, your Fergusons, you know, all of that. You know, we've still got a long way to go. But even so, this is a film that feels like it should have come out a long time before it did. It feels like it ought to be. It feels like it ought to be sort of lumped in with a sort of, you know, Plague of the Zombies kind of, a lot schlockier and a lot less knowing than it is. You know, that it has this very sort of neo-noir tone, a sort of realism to it, or hyper-realism to it, that doesn't fit the portrayals of different cultures, and it doesn't fit the content at all. So yeah, I don't know what to. I really don't know what to make of this one. I think it's. I'm kind of glad that I saw it out, purely because it's kind of interesting looking at the yeah, as I say, the sort of sociological side of it, but on the other hand, it made me deeply uncomfortable, and I'm kind of perturbed. What do I like about it? I mean, it's competently directed. It's quite evident, you know, watching it and not knowing the director was who he was, I was thinking, yeah, this is clearly somebody who knows his craft. Even if the script isn't great, the cinematography is pretty good. Some of the special effects are pretty cool, or at least pretty effective. As I say, big trigger warning for animal death and stuff, because there's a lot of sort of there's a lot of animal corpses being stumbled upon, and there is a scene where there is a sacrifice of a chicken and blood going everywhere, and but then there's also the arachnophobia issue. Basically there's a sort of mini subplot involving love interest lady being kind of magically attacked by evil cult leader chap. He sort of puts something onto her makeup compact, the sponge in her makeup mirror compact thing, which seems to contain spider eggs. There's this kind of spot that grows and grows, and honestly, full on disgusting, absolutely revolting. And like I say, I don't really have a problem with spiders, but that was gross. And I can imagine if you do have a problem with spiders, that that is not a scene you want to see. Honestly, it's not particularly a scene I wanted to see, and I love this stuff. It's really gross. Okay, I'm gonna say what it is. So if this, if spiders gross you out, stop here. This spot sort of grows and grows and grows, and she gets very, very sick, and then it starts to move, and then it opens, and live large spiders are crawling out of it, and it's not very nice. Honestly, it was the sequence itself was only a couple of minutes long, and the actual spider bit only lasted about 30 seconds, and then there's a sequence later on where Cal, the father guy, has come into the room and is trying to make a phone call, and there's a large sort of tarantula type thing climbing up the cord for the telephone receiver. But the effects with her and the spiders on her face only lasted about 20-30 seconds. That made quite an impression on me, I gotta say. The rest of the film, nothing really stood out other than the uncomfortable racial angle, in terms of effects or plot points, nothing honestly really stood out that didn't make me feel uncomfortable. I honestly don't know whether I can recommend this one over the last few that have been really quite awful, because yes, this is a more competently made film, it's competently acted, nobody's desperately unconvincing, but nobody's sort of wow, I totally believe their performance either. It's visually fine. Plot, it tells the plot very well. I wasn't confused like I have been with some of the others, but at the same time, racism. So yeah, your mileage may vary with this one, I think. Like I say, it's an interesting film, but it's not a good one. So yeah, this has been another bad one in the long sort of rubbish list of the Babadook. We've got to get another good one soon, guys. Let's see what we've got next. What we have next is something called Below. I don't know anything about it. The poster isn't horrible. but that doesn't really mean much. I mean, the poster for The Beast Within was pretty good, and so yeah, the search for another good one continues. So I will see you very shortly. Let's hope we don't have to deal with racism again. Bye bye.